Stop. Oh, you have.
This is Stephen Fry. We are going to invent an alphabet, and I'm going to make some of it up, and Stephen's going to make some of it up, and we're going to need you to help us with some of the letters. But we're going to start with... We're going to start with ambition, Stephen. What is it that you would most now like to do?
Now, it's very hard to answer. I have a theory that is very unpopular in America, that the worst thing you can ever be is goal-oriented. In America, it is taken as a sacred truth that the first step towards self-fulfillment and success is to set yourself goals. And I think that that is the most disastrous thing in life you can ever do, partly because if you miss your goals, you hate yourself and you feel a failure, and if you hit your goals, you are bound to be astonished by the fact that they don't bring any level of happiness. So it's just looking in the wrong direction. So I'm not sure what I'm ambitious to be. If I said I was ambitious to be happy, that would sound very dull. There's no one I am ambitious to go to bed with. There's no one I'm ambitious to meet necessarily. I suppose it's just what I'm ambitious for is not to turn into a bitter, angry old person. I'm now 52, and if there's anything in the world that upsets me, it is it's that kind of I hate this, I hate that. That, when you see newspapers saying why this is terrible, or people saying that something is crap, and those programs like Grumpy Old Men, it's just so easy. It's a lot of, people I like, Arthur Smith and Will Self, are bright and clever people, just pretending to be angry about things and I would hope that as I got older, I got more and more accepting of everything, so that if, say, in 30 years' time there's a modern equivalent of Lady Gaga, I want to think that I will say, tunes are so much better now than they ever were. All things are better than they ever were. They may not be, but they're almost certainly not worse. But something happens to you as you age that makes you convinced that they're worse. And I hate that something. I think it's deleterious to the human spirit to believe that your island of youth was somehow privileged and blessed as better, richer, more fulfilling, more artistic, more creative, more innocent. All of that is really a result of sentimentality of the wrong kind, false memory syndrome, and a lack of historicity. Because if you look in history, people have always said that. They've always said it. And I think the best ambition anyone can ever have is to get younger as they get older, to be more accepting and to be less closed. That's what I would hope for.
B is for bored.
Oh, thank you very much.
B is for bored. What makes you bored?
Oh, bored.
You work at a higher speed than almost anybody I know. So what holds you up?
Bored. I suppose it's very interesting being in the public eye. It relates to ambition. If you'd said, what was I ambitious for when I was a teenager? I've recently had to accept that when I was between 17 and 25, if I'm honest, I was desperate to be famous. I really was. And I know now that we're all supposed to pay lip service to the idea that fame is an illusion, a snare, a terrible rainbow that people chase that will only get further away. It's not the substance of what it is you should be doing, that the modern culture of celebrity is a terrible thing. But nonetheless, when I was a teenager watching Parkinson, I wanted to jump into the television and be part of this glamorous world of extraordinary people. I fantasized about being stopped in shops and asked for an autograph. But what I did not fantasize about was a world that, and oh, how just it is that I should suffer from it, a world that I've welcomed, the digital world, now means that unlike when I first did become quite well known, everybody now has a camera. And if you want to know what bores me, it is at a signing queue for a book, for example. It used to be fun to be able to go and what's your name, where are you from, without sounding like the Prince of Wales, which is a challenge. Gosh, that's interesting. I didn't know that. But to fall into a conversation is really good fun. But now that's impossible, because the moment someone arrives at the queue, they're looking at the person next to me and going, would it be all right if I had a photograph? And it's not only that they have a camera, whether it's in the form of a phone or a digital camera, it's, of course, they want to be in the picture. So they're giving it to someone else. And that person is like someone who has never seen a reptile being given a chameleon. What? So, how do I? It's just, I've turned it off, I think. It's. If I could have back the hours in which I have gone, oh, get on with it, for sake, get on with it. If I had that back, I would be very happy. So that is when I am maximally bored, if maximally can be considered an adverb.
Cambridge. What kind of transfer was that for you?
It was a very extraordinary thing for me, and what I'm about to say will sound about as poncy as you could ever be, but being as this is a literary festival, maybe it's allowable. When I was 17, I got arrested by the police, which I wrote about in my first autobiography, and I went to prison. And when I emerged from a custodial sentence, as it were, a custodial period, with 2 years probation. And my parents were understandably at the end of their tether, and they'd been amazing, considering I'd run away from this and I'd been expelled from schools. And so when I arrived back home on probation, I said, I want to do some A-levels. I'd run away from so many schools. And I'd done my O-levels when I was 14, because in those days you did. If you
well, no, most people did them at 16.
Yeah, but
you were just a lot smarter.
No, I mean, if you could. Yeah, all right. Yeah, all right. And so, but then I'd seriously kind of screwed up every other opportunity. So they said, well, it's fine if you really want to, but it's up to you. They said we're no longer going to do it. So I knew that Norwich City College, which is like a further education establishment in Norwich, did a 1-year A-level course. So I went literally the day I got back from Pucklechurch, and it's so beautiful and astounding and explosive. Anyway, I can tell quite rightly you are shatteringly bored by me talking about Wagner, but there you are. There may be a few Wagnerites in the audience.
Can I?
No, a few, thank
you. Can I just, sorry, can I skip X for a second and replace it with picking up something that you just said about the letter from Isaiah Berlin? Why is it that an Irishman can make Irish jokes, a Jew can write about the Holocaust? Why is the author of an artwork's identity important to the...
You're so right. It's very peculiar that you mentioned when we were talking about Hitler that my book, Making History, it received a complete savaging at the hands of the New York Times a literary reviewer. I happened to be in New York when it was out, and I don't read them, so I didn't know this. But a friend of a friend who had become a friend, Bret Easton Ellis, the novelist, was at a party, and he came up to me and said, give me a hug. I said, what? He said, you managed to get a worse review than American Psycho. Whoa! I said, oh no, really? Is it a disaster? He said, whoa, it's a stinker. You made fun of the Holocaust. You laughed at the dead Jews. I said, oh my God, does she think that? Does she honestly think I'm making light of the Holocaust? What, I mean, and I sort of went like that and said, but as a Jew, do you think I could hold up my hand to my friends and family? He said, are you Jewish? I said, well, yeah, sort of. My mother is, so I kind of am. Yeah, I'm not religiously so, but yeah. I mean, Hitler would think I was. He'd put me in the oven with the others, whether I liked it or not. So, I mean, if an I might as well say, yes, I am. He went, oh, like that. So I think he told her. And my opinion, anyway, she then wrote a review of my next book, I think it was my next book, which was my autobiography, Moab is my washcloth, in which he described making history as a sadly misjudged. People, yeah, thanks. But it did set me thinking that it's an odd thing, Ding an sich, a thing as it in itself and of itself doesn't really exist. If there's an artwork that seems to be disturbingly, say, about child eroticism, a lot of people would say that is disgusting, that is wrong, that is bad, that is wrong. If someone said to you, actually, this was just made by someone who was deeply abused as a child, and it's there coming to terms with it, you go, that's really important and interesting. That's a very interesting work of art. The actual knowledge of who made it completely transforms something, even though it is molecularly exactly the same thing. So knowing that a book that says this about the Holocaust is written by a Jew, or knowing it's written by a German, matters. And this is true of all things in art. So when you know that George Eliot is a woman and you're a Victorian, does it alter your view of Middlemarch if you'd thought George Eliot was a man? I don't know, it probably does. And vice versa, and all the way around.
This may be a bit of a twist, but I think you might have said teenage Stephen, but I would like you, if possible, to reprise just a little of the spirit of that letter that you wrote to, in this case, young Stephen.
Oh, goodness. Yes. Well, I was asked to write a letter to my young self by I think it was a gay magazine. In fact, it was reprinted in The Guardian. I can't remember exactly what I said, but it was on the basis of the fact that it so happened that I wrote a letter to my future self when I was 14. And it was a very angry and a very convinced letter saying, I know you will blush when you read this. I know you will think that I'm being hysterical. I know you think that the world is now about this, that, and the other, but I know where I'm writing from now is right, that who I am now is right, that what I feel now is the truth, and that every day I grow away from this moment and this age is a betrayal of who I am. I had this very peculiar sense of the primacy of the emotional world of the adolescent. When nature and poetry and love first explode in you, it makes you, or unmakes you perhaps, but it certainly transforms you. And I suppose, much as again as I love the digital world, one of the good fortunes I had about being born when I was is there was no internet, there was nothing to endorse or vindicate who I was or how I was except literature. There was nothing else but the library to tell me that I was not alone. Rock music didn't tell me I wasn't alone. It might have done to people like me later, or I might have been able to overlook or change gender names or that sort of thing in a rock lyric and say, oh yes, that does apply to me. But for the direct experience of lives similar to mine and the intensities and the pitch of life as I felt it, there was literature. And at the age of 14, this had all happened to me in that way that every month is 5 years when you're that age. And so I wrote this letter to myself. And then a year or two ago, I wrote a letter back. And in it, I pitied the abject misery of myself then, but I admired his ferocity, his certainty, his, as we would now say, authenticity, the primacy he gave to emotion, and the rawness and nakedness of his feelings. And I'm sometimes accused, or indeed complimented, on being not intellectual, because I'm not an intellectual in that sense as a noun, but of being intelligent, or of being learned, or of being rational or logical. And I'm happy to think I might be any one of those things, but I have never believed anything other than that feeling comes before thought, and that feeling makes us who we are, and that the emotions are a shortcut that are reliable. They can be unreliable too, but one thing they can't do is lie. You can't feel unhappy and say, no, I don't feel unhappy. If you're unhappy, you are unhappy. If you love, you love. You have to recognize what it is you're feeling, but feeling comes first. And I think as an adolescent, I knew that. And so I was hugging myself and saying, it's all going to be okay. It will be fine. You'll be amazed at how lucky your life will turn out to be. You will be amazed that actually the world does not belong to the strong, rugby-playing, thoughtless and unkind and rejecting people. The world belongs to you if you want it to. It belongs to writers and artists. It belongs to kindly people, to cheerful people, to people who want to help. And actually, there isn't so much to despair about. There is room in the world for you, so long as you allow yourself to believe it and don't sink into an attitude of self-pity and pessimism. That's sort of what I wrote.
Tell you what, if we do Z, then it means we've finished.
Yeah.
So why don't we hold that for another time and pick it up again?
Okay, that's a good deal. I like that.
I think it's been the highlight of my festival, and I'm deeply grateful to you.
Thank you very much.